There's a small handful of video games that are so absurdly good, they feel like they shouldn't exist. Like, the developers somehow broke the rules of what a 16-bit cartridge could do, and no one told them to stop. Streets of Rage 2 is one of those games. It's the rare sequel that doesn't only surpass the original, it absolutely demolishes it. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why this 1992 Sega Genesis classic is one of the most perfectly crafted action games ever made. We're talking about the razor-sharp combat, a legendary soundtrack, and mind-blowing visuals, and a few behind-the-scenes stories that'll make you appreciate this masterpiece even more, so let's jump in. So the setup is classic beat-em-up stuff. Mr. X, the crime boss you thought you defeated in the first game, is back. And this time, he's kidnapped Adam, one of the original 3 playable characters in the first game. So it's up to Axel and Blaze, along with 2 new faces, to hit the streets and get him back. Now, Sega could have just recycled the same great gameplay, but they instead went a few steps further. While the original game had 3 playable characters, the differences between them were pretty minor. But this time, the developers made sure each of the 4 characters felt completely unique. You have Axel, your standard all-arounder with the fastest punch speed. Then Blaze, who is more agile. But the 2 new characters are where the real fun begins. You have Max, a slow-moving but incredibly powerful wrestler who can just obliterate enemies. And then there's Skate, Adam's younger brother, who fights on rollerblades and is all about speed and trick maneuvers. No 2 play alike, hell, no 2 even play similar. And here's a piece of trivia that most don't know. The decision to cut Adam from the playable roster and replace him with these new characters? That was a deliberate choice. In a developer interview, the game's lead designer and artist, Yuzo Koshiro, actually admitted that she was the one responsible for Adam's disappearance. She felt that Adam didn't really have a specialty, so they decided to swap him out for characters that were more distinct. And you know what? That was the right call. Now, as someone who loved Adam in the first game, I understand the need to have him in this game as part of the story, but wish that he still could have been an unlockable character. To remove him entirely was a downer, but I guess it gave the sequel a fresh feel and made the character selection screen a lot more interesting. What you might not realize is just how much control Ayano had over the entire game. I mean, she was only 22 years old when she designed and art directed most of Streets of Rage 2. Think about that. What were you up to when you were 22? She came up with the character designs, the special moves, and even the damage parameters for every attack. It was a massive undertaking for someone so young, and it's really impressive how she just made it look easy, knocking it out of the park. Now, let's talk about the fighting, because this is where Streets of Rage 2 really separates itself from the pack. On the surface, it looks like a simple beat-em-up, where you just mash the attack button, and sure, you do plenty of that, but there's a surprising amount of depth under the hood. The first game had a special attack that was basically calling in a police car to clear the screen. For the sequel, they completely overhauled that system. Sega decided to axe the call for police backup, and instead, it gave us a new special attack system. Each character has their own unique special move you can perform. Alex has his iconic dragon uppercut. Blaze has her own devastating attack, and these moves are powerful, but they cost a little bit of your health to use, so you have to be strategic about when you pull them out. Use them at the right moment, and they can save your life, but use them recklessly, and you're just digging your own grave. The fighting mechanics were vastly improved across the board. Every attack lands with a perfect smack, a satisfying stun, and ultimately your foe collapsing to the ground in a screen-shaking defeat. You can chain combos together much better now, and you can even juggle enemies in the air if you time your attacks right. In fact, the game's creators were heavily influenced by Street Fighter II during its development. They loved it so much that they bought an arcade cabinet and installed it in their office. The team wanted the fights in Streets of Rage 2 to have a similar flow, 2 jabs, followed by a straight punch, then a heavy hit that sends the enemy flying. And you can really feel that influence when you're playing. The combat has a rhythm to it that makes every encounter just so damn satisfying. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The enemies aren't just punching bags either. The game gives every single enemy a health bar and a name. You can finally see how much damage you're doing and how close you are to taking down that big bruiser. And seriously, the variety of enemies you face is incredible. You have Muay Thai kickboxers, huge baseball players who do belly flops, kung fu masters, and even lunatics with jetpacks. The game constantly throws new threats at you, and the boss fights are super memorable and challenging. Some bad guys can block your regular attacks, some can power right through your specials, and some can even counter you before you can even land a first punch. That variety and depth is why this game never gets boring. Alright, so you know we've got to talk about the music. If there's one thing that Streets of Rage 2 is famous for, it's the soundtrack. And honestly, it might be the single greatest feature of the game. Yuzo Koshiro, Ayano's brother, composed the music. And he didn't just approach the music as mere background tunes. He created an electronic, techno, jazz rock fusion that completely takes center stage. The music is so good that it's considered by many as one of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time, myself included. And I mean, the first game itself had an incredible soundtrack, so it was only right for him to return and make those sweet tunes that your ears just love in this part 2. What makes it so special is how Yuzo created it. He used the Yamaha FM synth sound chip of the Sega Genesis, along with an NEC PC-88 computer and his own audio programming language called Music Love. He was influenced by the club music of the early 90s, house, techno, breakbeat, and even R&B. He wanted to be the first to introduce those sounds to video game music, and he succeeded. Tracks like Back into Industry and Max Man sound like they belong in a trendy Berlin disco, not in a 16-bit video game. The soundtrack has become part of the game's identity and is really like the soul of the game. It sets the tone for the entire experience, and it makes the gameplay somehow feel even more satisfying. Here's a couple clips for you to hear for yourself and enjoy. And another cool detail for you. The sound effects are equally as brilliant as the music. The thumps of every punch, the death cries of enemies, and the sound of a weapon connecting. It all adds to the visceral feel of the combat. Yuzo Koshiro was clearly ahead of his time, and his work on this game is a huge reason why it's still so beloved today. Next, let's take a moment to appreciate how good this game looks. The first game came on a tiny 4 megabit cartridge. Streets of Rage 2 here clocks in on a comparatively massive 16 megabits, a full 4 times increase in size. Sega needed all that extra memory because they wanted to make this new entry as stunning as they possibly could. The character sprites are significantly larger and more detailed than in the first game. It's obvious to see how the team used every bit of that extra cartridge space. The characters are big, beautifully animated, and have tons of personality. The environments are incredibly varied too. You fight through city streets, amusement parks, factories, and more. The backgrounds are packed with detail, and there are some neat new touches like foreground scrolling and some nice line and parallax effects. It makes for a heck of a lot to see and experience, making the first game seem like it was behind a generation. The technical side of things is also impressive. The game runs at a smooth 30 frames per second, which was standard for the time. And get this, when M2, the studio that handled the 3DS port, first saw the original code, they thought it would be impossible to port because the characters were so large. That just shows how ambitious the original development team was. And one thing that always stood out to me is how the game uses its difficulty. It is challenging, but it never feels unfair. The AI is significantly improved over the first game. Enemies will try to surround you, they'll block your attacks, and they'll definitely punish you if you get too greedy. It automatically forces you to think about your positioning and your strategy. And as you get further into the game, earlier bosses start showing up as regular enemies. It's a great way to show your progression and make you feel like you've really become a powerful fighter. So why does Streets of Rage 2 still matter today? Well, for starters, it's widely considered the best entry in the entire series and one of the greatest beat-em-ups ever made. It took everything that made the first game good and improved upon it in every single way. It perfected the formula. The legacy of this game is undeniable. Whether you grew up a Sega fan or not, the quality of this game's programming is god-tier level. But even more than that, it represents a special moment in gaming history, in my mind. The early 90s were the golden era for the beat-em-up genre. Arcades were full of them, and home consoles were finally powerful enough to deliver a similar experience. Streets of Rage 2 was Sega's answer to Capcom's Final Fight, and in many ways, it surpassed it. It proved that you didn't need an arcade cabinet to have a great brawler experience. You could have it right in your own living room. And that's a feeling a lot of us still chase today. That feeling of popping in a cartridge, grabbing a friend, and just having a blast. Streets of Rage 2 delivers that in spades. It's a game that's easy to pick up, but hard to put down. It's accessible enough for anyone to enjoy, but deep enough to keep you coming back for more. Sega only gave us one more game in the series, Part 3, before giving up on it completely, which is baffling. It would then take 26 more years before we finally received the next sequel, Streets of Rage 4, back in 2020, but all of that just makes this one even more special. So that's Streets of Rage 2, a game that even decades later still feels as thrilling and fun to play as it did back in 1992. The combat's so tight, the characters are memorable, the music is legendary, and the visuals still just look great. It's a masterclass in game design, and this game just did everything right. And I want to leave you with this thought. If you haven't played Streets of Rage 2 in a while, or if you never played it at all, do yourself a favor and fire it up. It's always an experience that is absolutely worth your time, and if you have played it, who was your main? Axel, Blaze, Max, or Skate? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your memories of this classic, and I really do read every single one. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.